Hello there. I'm going to be discussing a question on Macbeth. And part of this, of course, is that the realization that Macbeth was written by William Shakespeare. And it's an interesting play in the sense that this character is Macbeth, is a character driven by ambition. And ambition leads to tyrannical behavior and dictatorship, and even to murder of a king, or regicide. So before we start, the character Macbeth is portrayed as a tragic hero, and a tragic hero in terms of the fact that he was a warrior, but ends up as a regicidal tyrant. And he murders King Duncan, a king who favored him on recommendation of King Duncan's captain. So in other words, Macbeth betrayed the king. So there's this pull and this contrast between the light and darkness, the dark forces, and the good forces at war, if you like. And the witches plant seeds in Macbeth's mind as to his attainment of power. And Lady Macbeth pushes him to do the deed. And at the end, because Macbeth kills the king, he is the one to blame. And the Lady Macbeth, because she didn't kill the king, could always argue, I'm blameless. So his wife is also embroiled in evil forces, and she's very ambitious and untrustworthy. She later, however, commits suicide in the latter part of the play. Banquo is one of Macbeth's friends and a fellow soldier, a warrior, if you like. And these two characters, Macbeth and Banquo, journey to the witches to hear them prophesy about Macbeth's future. And Banquo is rather skeptical. He was worried about the fact that if Banquo and Macbeth, get embroiled in evil forces, it might lead to us having problems later on. And we can't trust what three witches are saying to us. We should be more real, if you like. The witch's prophecy is that his sons will be kings, and eventually Macbeth will become king. Okay, and there are other characters in the play as well, like Macduff, an honorable thane, a man of destiny, who ultimately kills Macbeth. So Macbeth does indeed bring evil upon himself, if you like, towards the end of the play. However, Macbeth is really deceitful in the sense that his ambition, his greed, leads him to kill his best friend Banquo. And that's a horrible thing, a consequence of greed, if you like, violence. Lady Macbeth calls on violence as well. She calls on the evil spirits, and she calls on those spirits to give her husband and herself power to overthrow the kingdom of King Duncan and his loyal subjects. So there's a lot of interesting context of ambition, violence, supernatural, deceit, and later in the play, guilt. Okay, so we've got ambition of Macbeth and his wife, Lady Macbeth. We've got kingship of King Duncan and the destruction thereof by Macbeth. We've got fate and free will. Macbeth didn't have to do what he did, but he chose to through his greed. And his fate is that he ends up dying just like King Duncan died. The appearance and reality, in other words, putting all your trust in witches is probably unwise, or it's evil, and it leads to paranoia, not bravery and courage, but leads to destruction, because the witches really were after their own power in the kingdom of Macbeth and his wife, because they would be able to control the community through their supernatural powers. So they were also interested in that as well. You can't forget that. The motifs are there lots of images and recurrent themes that occur throughout the play of darkness and night, blood, hallucinations that Macbeth and Lady Macbeth have, which are bad dreams, and a series of repetition in terms of disturbed sleep and guilt, and having to kill others in order to cover up crimes, if you like, of former murders. So Shakespeare uses blood, sleeplessness, hallucinations as symbols of how to explore guilt, and manifests itself within the characters of Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. He shows that guilt is an inevitable consequence of unavoidable tragedy, in the sense that if you're going to commit murder or rely on predictions from unnatural sources like witches, you're going to bring upon yourself violence and death, and hence do not be deceived by the dark forces. So Shakespeare was way ahead of his time, if you like, dark forces, okay? And we've seen that the dark force in the Star Wars. So he was amazing in terms of his writing by being centuries ahead of his time. So Macbeth portrays himself as a grand savior, but in fact is a horrible, deceitful character and can't be trusted. And certainly can't be trusted as a new king. Okay, so that's sort of an introduction. So let's share a picture, if you like, of this character. And there he is. Okay, he's going to the, Macbeth is going to the three witches, and they're around a cauldron full of frogs' legs boiling up, and other things I've added. And they're using the cauldron and the mist and smoke from it to throw spells or predictions to Macbeth's future and his ultimate overthrow of King Duncan. The witches themselves look extremely evil, cloaked in darkness. Macbeth is cloaked in a cloak as a warrior. Why would such a brave warrior seek consonance or seek advice from such dark characters? It tells you about the mind of Macbeth, as he is evil. Okay, so if we get up one of the questions, and the question I want to get up is the first one here. And here we go, in terms of Banquo and Macbeth. And they kind of like have been to the witches, and they've heard the witches' prophecy. Macbeth and Banquo have been told that Duncan has made Macbeth the Thane of Cawdor. So King Duncan really favored Macbeth and promoted him. So it was a shame that Macbeth turned on him and killed him. The question is to analyze the extract and then to analyze the relationship between these two characters in the whole play. So let's, without further ado, read the extract, and as we go along, there'll be some pointers for analysis. Banquo, but 'tis strange, and oftentimes to win us to our harm. The instruments of darkness tell us truths. The contradiction, harm and truths, oxymoron, win us with honest trifles. So trifle, three witches, trifle is three. Honest, well, they're portraying that they're honest by hanging around a cauldron of boiling frogs' legs, but their ultimate aim is to betray Macbeth, to betray in deepest consequence, cousins. A word, I pray you. So Macbeth is a cousin to the witches, his family, if he's going to listen to them. But Banquo is very cautious. He doesn't want to listen to the witches, and he's encouraging Macbeth not to. Macbeth replies, two truths are told as happy prologues to the swelling act. Of the imperial theme, I thank you, gentlemen, the supernatural soliciting. Soliciting, supernatural, alliteration, swelling, sibilance, SS, the act, and imperial is referring to the ultimate loss of King Duncan and he taking over the role of King Duncan. Cannot be ill, cannot be good. Repetition. Ill and good, contrast, oxymoron, if ill, repetition. Why has it given me earnest of success, commencing in a truth? I am fain of caudal. So therefore I'm recognized, and if I am to be blessed through the evil ways, well then so be it, he's saying. If good, why do I yield to that suggestion? Whose horrid image doth unfix my hair? So he's debating, well, King Duncan has promoted him. Should he really go along the path of regicide and make my seated heart knock at my ribs, his conscience, against the use of nature, present fears, are less than horrible imaginings. So he's trying to say that if his destiny is to kill King Duncan, then it should be. Although his conscience, his heart is plain on him, why should I kill this man who's promoted me to the fame? My thought, his murder yet is but fantastical, so it's just in his imagination. He hasn't decided to do it yet. Shake so my single state alliteration of man, that function is smothered in surmise, lots of sibilants, and nothing is but what is not. So he's basically saying, well, let me just keep it as a thought rather than act upon it. It's the Lady Macbeth who pushes him to act upon it. The vision of the dagger, calling him someone who's not a man, and pushing him to kill the king whilst he sleeps. Okay, so that's analyzing the extract. Okay, and if we move on to some other points, the duality of Macbeth's feelings is quite interesting in the play as a whole. And should he believe in darkness or in light? It shows that he's a weak character in the sense that he can't make up his mind whether he should go the bad way or the good way. But he's also very greedy, so he's pushed the bad way. Greedy for what? For the throne of King Duncan. So he's decided to embrace the prophecies of the witches. And as I said earlier, it's just a thought, yet he doesn't know which way to go. Banquo is realistic about the instruments of darkness and danger and what they can lead Macbeth to. And indeed, what could happen to Banquo himself, as indeed Macbeth kills him later on. Banquo is keen to hear the prophecies for himself, and Macbeth is keen to know more. As the play progresses, Banquo does not act upon the prophecies of the witches, whereas Macbeth, convinced of them, goes back to the witches to seek more prophecies and embroidens himself further in evil and destruction. Indeed, he becomes more of a tyrant. Tyrant is someone who rules by absolute decree, and often a tyrant kills, murders, as he rules. He believes in the witches' prophecies completely, which is unfortunate. So the contradiction of this man who King Duncan promoted to the fane of Caudle and his tyrannical behavior is very evident. And Shakespeare is trying to say, rather go the good way, as if he had stayed in King Duncan's kingdom, he could have been promoted and eventually take over from King Duncan in a peaceful way rather than a bloody way. The supernatural aspects in terms of don't go into the supernatural, as they could bring upon you evil. What happens to the Macbeths? They both die, so evil did fall upon them. And this whole play is full of emotive language and dramatical devices, and a lot of oxymorons as well, paradoxes. All right. The image of the dagger is also very important, as it shows the upcoming murder by dagger of King Duncan as he sleeps. But also the appearance of Banquo's ghost suggests how supernatural forces have turned on Macbeth, and Macbeth has become riddled with guilt of what he has done. So the theme of deception of Macbeth is overwhelming. He deceives not only King Duncan but his friends, and kills a lot more people as well, until eventually he meets his own violent death. So the dramatic context of his deceit, violence, guilt, ambition, and tyrannical behavior links to the supernatural forces of evil. And indeed, Elizabethans at the time really believed in the supernatural, and Shakespeare uses this context as a haunting effect, which leads the audience to think that Macbeth is actually possessed by evil forces, by Satan, forces which have come from the witches. But don't forget that the witches have tricked him, used him, because they also want power in the kingdom, as they want to influence the whole community, if you like. Okay, so that ends this analysis, and I hope you enjoyed it. So keep up the good work, and I hope you enjoy the rest of Macbeth. Just keep working hard and remember some quotes, and try and link the context of the argument to the quote that you've written down. I wish you all the best, as I said. Take care. Bye.